Once everyone has it, say amen.
You said John what?
John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. I'll read that. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrance oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you are going there again. Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, but because he sees the light of this world. But if no one walks in the light, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sake that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us go also, that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he might die, he shall live. And whosoever lives and believes in me shall not die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And he said these things. She went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, The teacher has come and is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she quickly arose and went and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, She is going to the tomb to weep there. Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, See how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus said, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, I did not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound, hand and foot, with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Loose him and let him go. Then many of the Jews who came had come to Mary and said, and had seen the thing that Jesus believed in him. This morning, my message is simply, Jesus wept. In verse 1 through 5, we see the setting in the background. We see the siblings, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. We know that Lazarus is sick, and they sent for Jesus. And in verses 6 through 17, Jesus waits to go to Bethany. After Jesus hears them, he stays for about 2 more days. He knew Lazarus was dead and wanted everyone to see God's glory. In verses 18 through 32, Jesus arrives and is confronted by Mary and Martha. And they both say the same thing. If he had been here, Lazarus would still be alive. Then in verses 33 through 38, we see where everyone is groaning and mourns the loss of Lazarus. We see where the Jews wept. We see where Jesus weeps. And Jesus goes to his siblings. And of course, in verses 39 through 45, we see where Lazarus is raised from the dead. I'm just going to give 2 points. I'm going to make this plain and simple this morning. And I'm going to point out the statements of Mary and Martha to Jesus. Martha's response to Jesus, we see in verse 11, in verse 22. But even now, that whatever you ask of God will give you. And Jesus said to her, Your brother will arise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will arise again in the resurrection day at the last day. But that wasn't what Jesus was talking about. Jesus was telling her that he was going to raise him from the dead. And it would be toward the glory of God. But the 2 things that I noticed about Martha that was a good thing was number 1, her faith. And number 2, her willingness to trust in Jesus despite the circumstances. All right? And number 3, the only thing that I found in her that was kind of negative was the fact that she limited Jesus. She only limited Jesus to what she could understand. But Mary's response is a tad bit different. After she asks Jesus, or tells Jesus, had you been here, my brother would have not died, all she did was wept. and she was so overcome with grief. And I looked at Jesus, and I noticed Jesus' response to her was that he groaned in his spirit, and he wept. And looking through the scriptures, Jesus didn't weep often. I know he wept in the Garden of Gethsemane, but other than that, he didn't weep often. And Jesus, when he came to Martha, he came with happy spirits, because he knew that this was an opportunity for the glory of God to be seen. And the thing that I noticed the most about Jesus in this particular chapter is his love. In verses 3, it talks about how he loved Lazarus. It says, therefore the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. And in verse 5, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And in 36, after he wept, the Jews looked at him and said, see how he loved him. Jesus didn't weep because he was sad that Lazarus died. He was excited about Lazarus' death because he knew that God would raise him up. But he was stricken with grief because of Mary, because of her heart, because of her disgruntlement. And the thing about this that I want to point out to each of you all is, when most of us look at this passage, we think of simply just the miracle of Lazarus coming from the dead. But it's a perfect example of God and Jesus' love for us. Everything he allows us to go through, the suffering, the pain, the anguish, the disappointments, he feels as well. But in order for us to rely on him, we must go through those certain things. It hurts him to see us in pain. It hurts him to see us struggle, but without that, we won't admit when we are wrong or that we will need him. So my support text will come from John 15, verses 9 through 17. And I'll read that. As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandment and abide in his love, these things I have spoken to you, that may joy remain in you, and that your joy may be filled. This is my commandment to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than to lay down one's life for his friend. You are my friends, if you do whatever I command you to do. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. You should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. These things I command you, that you love one another. And that's the greatest gift that God has given us. He's given us love. Amen. And in us abiding in love, we abide in him. So I know this message is simple this morning, but the message is simple as plain. It's to love one another. Trust in him. Believe in him. Don't limit him. And trust in him in everything that we do. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord till I die.
Thank you.